For years, we've been told that two-factor authentication is the solution. Use a password and a second factor. Add a code. Prove a push notification. Problem solved. It's become the default advice for staying secure online, repeated by tech companies, security teams, and even government agencies. Turn on two-factor authentication and you'll be protected. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Two-factor authentication is not a guarantee. It reduces risk. It raises the bar. But it does not eliminate compromise. And in many cases, attackers have already adapted to it. The real danger isn't that 2FA doesn't work. It's that people believe it makes them immune. So the real question isn't whether two-factor authentication works. It's why it's no longer enough on its own in the modern threat landscape.
Breach Bites TV.
Two-factor authentication, often called 2FA or multi-factor authentication, was introduced to solve a very specific problem: password weakness. People reuse passwords across dozens of sites. They choose simple passwords that are easy to remember. They fall for phishing attacks that trick them into typing credentials into fake login pages. When passwords get exposed in data breaches, attackers reuse them across multiple sites in what's known as credential stuffing, automating login attempts at scale. 2FA added a second barrier to interrupt that automation. Even if someone stole your password, they would still need something else: a code sent to your phone, an authenticator app generating rotating numbers, or a hardware token you physically possess. For a while, this was extremely effective. Automated attacks dropped significantly against accounts with 2FA enabled because attackers could no longer rely on passwords alone. But security doesn't stand still. Attackers adapt to whatever defenses become common. And when defenders add friction, attackers stop trying to break the lock and instead start looking for ways around it. One of the biggest misconceptions about 2FA is that it's a single thing. It isn't. There are different types, including SMS text message codes, authenticator apps, push notifications, email-based codes, and hardware security keys. And they don't all offer the same level of protection. SMS-based 2FA can be intercepted through SIM swapping attacks, where an attacker convinces a mobile carrier to transfer a victim's phone number to a new SIM card under their control. Once they control the number, they receive the verification codes as if they were the victim. Push-based 2FA can be abused through what's called MFA fatigue, where an attacker repeatedly attempts to log in and triggers dozens of push notifications until the victim taps approve simply to stop the constant buzzing. Even authenticator apps, which are stronger than SMS, can be bypassed through sophisticated phishing kits that capture both the password and the one-time code in real time and immediately replay them to the legitimate service. Two-factor authentication adds protection, but it also creates new decision points, and every decision point becomes a potential weakness. Modern phishing has changed dramatically over the last few years. Attackers don't just send a fake login page and hope you enter your credentials. They build proxy sites that sit between you and the real service in real time. When you log into a fake site, it silently connects to the legitimate website in the background. You enter your password. Then you enter your 2FA code. The attacker's system instantly relays that information to the real service before the code expires, capturing a valid, authenticated session. From your perspective, everything may appear normal because the attacker forwards the legitimate content back to you. From the attacker's perspective, they now have a fully authenticated session tied to your account. This is why many recent breaches have involved victims who had 2FA enabled. The attackers didn't break encryption. They didn't guess the code. They simply inserted themselves into the conversation between the user and the service. Two-factor authentication protects against replaying old credentials, but it does not always protect against real-time interception. There's also a psychological shift that happens when people enable 2FA. They feel secure, and that feeling changes behavior. Once someone believes they are protected, they may reduce vigilance in other areas without realizing it. They may reuse passwords more freely because they assume the second factor compensates. They may click links with less hesitation because they believe a stolen password alone isn't enough. They may ignore login alerts because they assume nothing can happen without their approval. Security tools can unintentionally create a false sense of immunity. But cybersecurity has always been about layers, not silver bullets. No single control eliminates risk. When people treat 2FA as a shield instead of a layer, they unknowingly increase exposure. Attackers understand this shift in mindset. They know that widespread 2FA adoption changes how users think, so they design attacks that rely on human reaction instead of technical weakness. Even if an attacker cannot intercept your 2FA code, they may not need to attack the login process at all. Once you successfully log into a website, your device stores a session token that proves you are authenticated. That token allows you to navigate the site without re-entering your password or second factor repeatedly. It's designed for convenience. But if malware infects your system, or if a malicious browser extension is installed, or if your device is compromised in another way, that session token can be extracted and reused. From the service's perspective, the attacker isn't logging in. They're already logged in. No password required. Number 2, FA required. Two-factor authentication protects the authentication event, but it does not always protect what happens afterward. Modern attackers increasingly focus on session hijacking and token theft because it bypasses authentication entirely and avoids triggering additional security checks. Human behavior still remains the deciding factor in most breaches. If someone receives a login alert at an unusual time and dismisses it without thinking, that's a vulnerability. If someone approves an unexpected push notification because they assume it's a glitch, that's a vulnerability. If someone receives a phone call from someone claiming to be IT support and is persuaded to read off a verification code, that's a vulnerability. Attackers combine technical techniques with social engineering because people are far more predictable than encryption algorithms. They don't just hack systems. They manipulate people into bypassing systems themselves. Two-factor authentication cannot protect against someone voluntarily granting access under pressure, authority, urgency, or confusion. Attackers are skilled at manufacturing those emotional states. Security also competes constantly with convenience and productivity. The more friction you introduce, the more users look for ways to reduce it. If 2FA prompts become frequent and disruptive, users may begin approving them automatically without carefully reviewing the context. If codes are required repeatedly throughout the day, people may start viewing them as routine rather than meaningful. This isn't stupidity. It's cognitive fatigue. Humans optimize for efficiency. When security controls interrupt workflows, behavior adapts to minimize interruption. Attackers understand this and exploit the normalization of prompts. The goal of strong security design isn't to bombard users with more alerts. It's to design systems that require fewer risky decisions and that make malicious behavior stand out clearly instead of blending into daily noise. So if two-factor authentication isn't enough on its own, what actually works? The answer isn't abandoning it. The answer is layering it intelligently. Hardware-based authentication keys are significantly more resistant to phishing because they verify the legitimacy of the website before completing authentication, preventing attackers from proxying the session. Passkeys and web authentication-based logins reduce reliance on passwords altogether and bind authentication to a specific device and domain. Risk-based authentication can silently evaluate location, device fingerprint, and behavior patterns to trigger additional verification only when something truly looks suspicious. Limiting session duration, monitoring for abnormal activity, and implementing strong endpoint protection reduce the impact of token theft. Security is not about one feature being perfect. It's about combining multiple imperfect layers in a way that compensates for human limitations and attacker creativity. If you've watched the previous videos on this channel, you may notice a consistent pattern. Password rules fail when they ignore how people actually behave. Smart people get hacked when systems assume perfect decision-making under pressure. And two-factor authentication falls short when it's treated as a complete solution instead of one protective layer in a broader strategy. Cybersecurity often struggles because it's marketed as certainty. Enable this, install that, turn this on, and you're safe. But security is never certainty. It is probability management. It is reducing risk, not eliminating it. And attackers only need one overlooked path, one fatigued approval, one stolen token to succeed. Two-factor authentication is still valuable, and you should absolutely use it everywhere it's available, but you should not believe it makes you untouchable. Attackers adapt to defenses as soon as they become standard. They shift from breaking locks to convincing you to open the door. They move from stealing passwords to stealing sessions. They stop attacking barriers directly and start exploiting the human behavior around those barriers. Security works best when it accounts for human limitations instead of assuming human perfection. If you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing. On this channel, we explore why cybersecurity fails in the real world, not just in theory, but in everyday behavior, system design, and psychology. If you haven't already, check out the videos on why password rules still fail and why smart people get hacked, because they connect directly to this one and build on the same theme. If you enjoyed any of these, please consider subscribing, because the more we understand how modern security actually breaks down, the better we can design systems that are harder to exploit. I'll see you in the next one.